Hey, Reynard, did you hear that the Writers Guild just won their strike?
Yeah, it's really good news.
Yeah, I know, they got so much stuff there. And one of the big talking points is how they got protections against AI.
Just we're safe from our robot overlords.
I know, right? And you know, speaking of robot overlords, have you seen The Creator?
Really? You're gonna go for that? Low-hanging fruit?
Come on, man, I'm trying to start the video with something here.
10 years ago today, the artificial intelligence created to protect us detonated a nuclear warhead in Los Angeles.
The future of original movies are at stake. The creator, Gareth Edwards' latest sci-fi project, will be the sole deciding factor to determine if original stories are ever made again, or if Hollywood will forever become a soulless AI machine, as if it isn't already. Speaking of AI, they're the bad guys in this movie. Or are they? When undercover agent Joshua Taylor has his cover blown, it causes the death of his wife and her unborn child. Except wait, she's alive! And Joshua has to get back in the game to save her. Along the way, he discovers a robot child who has the awesome, godlike power of being a universal remote. Can they stop the war between humans and robots before it's too late? Can they finish the story before the audience falls asleep?
So, I wrote that little synopsis there.
I think it's only fair we should eternally force one another to read our own words.
It's this constant one-upsmanship of who can come up with the craziest thing for the other to read. But here's the thing. So, even despite all that, let's just kind of put with our initial thoughts here. I overall did like this movie more than I disliked it. Although, I didn't love it as much as I was hoping I was going to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, this was a movie that I enjoyed looking at, but I didn't enjoy thinking about as much. I think on a visual level, it's very successful in terms of kind of world building and creating dynamic visual effects and stuff, but I was kind of grasping for, like, characters and, like, granular story beats that I was engaged with to, like, kind of hang on that rock.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very similar sentiment to like how I'm feeling with it as well. It's so this movie, it's the first film from Gareth Edwards in 7 years. You know, he did 2014 Godzilla, he did Rogue One, and now he's come out with this, and I feel like we're starting to kind of see a trend with with the way he's presenting stories, because in all these movies, visually very impressive, they have really fantastic set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But can you tell me the main character's name of Godzilla 2014? Godzilla doesn't count.
Fuck. The god monster that Godzilla fights, whose name I also don't remember. Elizabeth Olsen is her name. And is it Taylor Kitsch in that one too, or I don't know.
You know what? I know Bryan Cranston was in it, but I know he also died like
5
a third
seconds.
of the way.
Yeah.
You know, this is actually a bad question for me because I don't know this answer myself. For all I know, the character's name was Elizabeth Olsen.
I'm gonna look it up right now. Brody.
L?
Like Elle Fanning.
Okay.
Like she.
Huh. Okay.
I got one of the syllables right, I guess, kind of. Maybe.
You got E, which is literally the most common letter in the English alphabet.
There we go.
Anyways, let's talk about Creator now. So, basic premise of this movie that it takes place in this alternate timeline where we developed like androids and artificial intelligence in the 1950s, and they kind of lived alongside us for years. But then one day, an AI-controlled nuclear warhead wiped out Los Angeles just out of the blue, and so the United States declared war on robots. Now, like, East Asia / New Asia is the country that they call it, harbors them, and wars being fought between Asia and the United States. The U.S. has a giant evil space station called NORAD. That's like a dreadnought thing.
It's Nomad. NORAD is the people that like track Santa and do other things the rest of the year.
Oh,
it's Nomad.
Nomad. No. Nomad Land is taking a very strange turn here.
That'd be really fun, though.
Yeah, this is what they tracked Santa with now. It's very
with that fucking giant, like, hovering target laser. He does love a good space laser.
Oh, Jesus. But yeah, so they have Nomad, and their whole goal is that they're trying to assassinate someone called Nirmata, who is like the person creating the AI. So if they take them out, then like they cut off the source of the AI. I think that's what the plan is.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to start with being nice to the movie, or do you want to dig right in?
I mean, we can like talk about some. Let's talk about the strengths of the film. We can talk about its visuals and stuff, and kind of eke away.
Yeah, it's You want to start the conversation off?
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's interesting to see. I think we've got a lot of different, like, AI is a popular concept to kind of cover, and we have AI, artificial intelligence by Steven Spielberg. The one with Alicia Vikander, just but I think this is an interesting way to kind of. It feels lived in, and it feels like it's been around for a while, and it feels like there's a variety of things. We have the synths or whatever with the more human-looking ones, except for their kind of hollow head. But then you've also got more robotic-looking folks and different sort of like... And it doesn't try to make some kind of like class thing out of it. Everything's kind of very homogenous and cohabiting and whatnot, but you do have this sort of... I would call it organic, but it's obviously very much not. But it does feel like lived in, and it feels like this has been something they've been kind of sharing this world together for a while, which was interesting.
I think that's the biggest saving grace of this movie. Not just, because the visuals of it, everyone's been talking about it, and yes, the visuals are stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I like it opens like kind of like quote unquote stock footage. It shows robots running in a race from like the 1950s, so the film was all kind of aged. Like, that's it. Fun presentation there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like the way that this world is realized is so interesting. Like this, and no matter how off the movie can be at points, and at times it does get a little, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I always wanted to keep watching because I always wanted to see what new thing is going to be presented to us.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It keeps like furthering the story and stuff. I do want to kind of qualify it a little bit. I don't quite know what I think about the kind of like this New Asia is. They show a map at one point. It's pointedly not China, and it's pointedly not Japan. It's kind of like Southeast Asian Peninsula and whatnot. And it is interesting to see some sort of depiction of these kind of. It's very like Buddhist rooted and stuff, but did it feel like there's all the little like inner titles and stuff that are in like katakana or in like Thai script and whatnot. It felt at points a little bit like white people Chinese tattoo in a way.
That kind of like that Orientalism in a way, where it's like...
and that's an important thing that I'll get to. I won't really want to talk about his relationship to violence in the film, and that's an important aspect there. But just kind of as an aesthetic, sometimes I was a little like, huh.
I do feel like it's... Yeah, I do think that's something that is worth commenting on, because I feel like what it's trying to go for is, first of all, it's probably trying to go for East Asian box office, first of all. Because I do think that in the map, at least I saw, I think Japan was included in like this New Asia kind of a thing.
I couldn't remember.
That must have been an interesting conversation, because from what I could tell from the movie, like this timeline diverged after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just imagining Japan going to like these like Southeast Asian countries and be like, hey guys, it's a little awkward, but hear us out.
The whole imperial thing.
Yeah, I feel like it tries to kind of take on these aesthetics to try to make itself seem like very spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the whole
That's
like,
cool.
like taking on like the Buddhist, specifically like Buddhist trappings that felt like, without necessarily digging into it too much. Because on the one hand, I don't want a white knight to be like, oh, this is so offensive, but on the other hand, it does kind of feel like it's like
I don't think it's like ill-intentioned or anything. It just feels a little funny at points, just with the level of that the script gets to, and just the usage of this iconography.
Yeah, so kind of like it wants to like borrow the aesthetic without necessarily baking it in fully, without really exploring the full depth of it.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a recurring pattern in the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, it's all kind of like tied together. It's a little bit difficult to untangle, but I think it's important to kind of be able to pull out like interesting aspects of it. I think the visuals are very good, and there are some amazing explosions too.
Yeah. This is like Gareth Edwards, like forget Michael Bay. Like Gareth Edwards can film a big boom. He can make the big boom go. Yeah, it's like there's a lot of different aspects. Like I'll probably I'm gonna kind of go off here for a little bit, just like little aspects that I really enjoyed in this, like seeing how like robots live, they have to sleep like humans, they get like plugged in, and they flop around. Yeah. They devote themselves to religion, kind of like we were talking. There's a very there's like robots and like Buddhist robes and everything. And they tell stories of a pending savior. And I also like they kind of act like people. Like there's one AI in particular. He's not even one of the simulants that's like has like a human face. He's just like a robot-faced robot. And he's groggy when he wakes up. He stumbles over his words, and I think that's just like a fun little touch there. He's not perfect robot. He's like a people.
Yeah, it's really clear that someone was thinking about all of these little like details and kind of fleshing it out, rather than it's just robots. They're robots.
Yeah, you get to see like there's a scene where we see this manufactory that's making the robots, and like they're alive on the assembly line, watching themselves be assembled. There's this part where there's a robot being like they're clearing out the devastation from the Los Angeles nuclear attack, and this robot accidentally gets turned on again. And he starts freaking out about it's like someone's. I think it was like Emily. I forget the name, but they're calling out for someone, and it's this really kind of like it's one of those moments that really punches above its weight, because it's like we can imagine like Emily's probably someone really important to this robot. Was he supposed to be taking care of her? Was he supposed to be maybe like they were married even? I don't know if human robots marriage was a thing before the war, maybe. But it's like those little moments where it's like, that adds just like the little extra impact.
Yeah,
and even things.
Yeah, no.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I think it's strongest in this thing where it's like these little details. I think it's strongest story beats. Like, even if you look at our protagonist, Joshua, is that his name?
That's
Yes.
his name. That's his name.
You know, he's got the like prostheses that I think he says he got due to the nuclear strike, but I could be wrong about that. Could just be during his service. But like, you kind of build in like he has this resentful relationship toward AI and robots, and yet he is partially not robotic because those are just like prosthetics, but like he's got this technology that he is using in his everyday life, and it does kind of color our understanding of him, at least in a not common way, and help us to kind of see this. So it's the small details can be interesting for sure.
Yeah, and one more that I also really want to highlight is seeing how like the anti-AI Americans, they actually do have their own little robots that are like little suicide bombers. Which actually I thought it was a really funny image. Just it looks like a soda can just like jogging down the bridge.
Something out of like Doctor Who or something.
Yes, yes, exactly. But again, it's like, and honestly, it's kind of funny because these were the parts of the movie that I care about more than the actual story. Because Joshua, it's like, yeah, Josh, I know you got to find your wife, but look, there's the robots are monks. That's so cool. I want to go look at them for a few minutes.
Just go have like a Richard Attenborough like nature documentary about daily life in Random Village Number 5.
Honestly, like, yeah, like that's the kind of thing that I'm really interested in, like, kind of digging into with this. Yeah, like those are like the biggest strength of this movie. Other aspects, like I thought the performances were pretty solid overall. Although I might just be comparing John David Washington to his performance in Tenet.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get a bead on. I think he did a fine job. I don't know if he's quickly becoming one of, he's worked with Nolan and Tenet. He had that god-awful Malcolm and Marie. And so it's like the projects haven't been great, but I'm also kind of starting to wonder a little bit about his, like, there wasn't a lot of like charisma to his performance that I was getting, at least. I think he had like decent chemistry with the little kid, at least in the second half. But I don't know, there's something a little bit off. Like, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't like blowing my mind either.
Yeah, like he didn't do anything where I was like, oh wow, that's like an incredible moment. But and again, it's kind of comparing him to the movie where he was literally called the protagonist. I know that's like,
I was hoping you would say I'm the creator or something at some point in this film.
You are a creator. We keep dunking on Tenet.
Yeah, deserves it.
But also got to do a shout out Ray Einstein, his amazing voice.
I really wanted more of him just so I could listen to him. Like, I almost have to just go watch The Witch or something right after this to just get that like sweet fix.
The most soothing chainsaw I've ever heard in my life.
Oh my god. Soothe me to sleep.
I wonder if I... What went we out? I can't do the voice.
No, there's like this like husk. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe if I like come back to me in like 40 years and we'll see how it is.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else like good we want to highlight?
I think those are like the big strengths. I'm sure stuff will kind of float to the surface as we sort of dig into it.
Yeah. But yeah, so I have to say that I'm really glad that we finally have a movie that is bold enough to ask if American imperialism is bad actually.
Yeah, I thought we were like done making Vietnam War movies.
It's like buddy, we're at the point we're making like Afghanistan movies, okay? We have to keep up.
He already made an Afghanistan movie with Godzilla. He made a World War II movie with Rogue One, and he made a Vietnam movie here. And I haven't seen Monsters, so I don't know what. Maybe that's like the Korean War or something. I don't know.
That's Napoleon Wars. It's
the Boer Wars. Gandhi's in it for some reason.
But yeah, like it's that's the thing. Like with this movie, it feels like, for all the buzz of it, like, and I was kind of hyping this up myself because like, oh, it's like a completely original movie. It's not based on anything. But then we see it and it's kind of based on, it's based on everything.
Yeah. I think kind of like talking about this, like, sort of how it's very much like, it's very overt in its politics. And I'm fine with like a lack of subtlety. It did get to a point, the one attack where like the army are coming for Joshua and the Alfie for the 18th time. Like when that like massive tank with the words U.S. Army, like the worst font ever, just comes crashing out of the forest. Like I just rolled my eyes because it was like, the lead up was genuinely kind of intriguing because there's this big thing rustling in the woods. What is it? And then when it's like, oh, it's like U.S. imperialism incarnate, and it's the least subtle thing, and it's just like bombing civilian. It was just like, okay, I get your point. Like, I've seen Platoon and Apocalypse Now. But I think like going off this, I have a very Gareth Edwards' relationship to violence is very interesting. And I mean that in like the most neutral way possible. And I think it's something that, you've mentioned his other films, and he's kind of like not a one-trick pony, but he's definitely got a very specific focus of interest. And I think you see it across all these films where it's like I think it was like Truffaut or somebody who said there's like made a statement like in an interview. It's like there's no such thing as an anti-war film. The implication, I guess, being like depiction of violence you're kind of indulging, and it kind of negates the intent of your message. I don't know if I really agree. I think it's a little bit reductive, but I do think that this movie kind of proves that point. Like, he has this aversion to his violence is very sanitary. It's all like these huge explosions, which we see from afar, and partly that's for spectacle, of course, but we also like have this like wide scale destruction, but in a very clean way possible. And anytime we get up close violence, he kind of seems very squeamish about it. Like he'll cut away, or he'll sort of like flinch at the last second and not. I'm not saying you have to depict violence, and I'm sure some of it you can do implication and stuff, but there's just something about the like alchemy of how he did it. Like we get the platoon scene in the village where the one guy's like harassing him with the dog and stuff, and that's about as close as we get to like something that feels like quote unquote gritty. And I'm not necessarily saying I want grittiness or anything like that, but I think he wants to depict it, but then kind of doesn't follow through, and therefore it kind of does become, I want the guilty pleasure of showing explosions and disaster, but I really don't want to think about the ethical implications of it. And then grafting onto Vietnam, I'm just like,
I think, yeah, definitely that is a great point. I actually have, I'm saying something about this in my big video that I'm working on right now, talking about anti-war movies and how, not necessarily that there is no such thing as an anti-war movie, but I think that a lot of movies that are advertised and held up as being anti-war also tend to try to say, oh, yes, war is bad, but at the same time, isn't it so cool when it goes explodey everywhere?
Yeah.
And I think you hit a really good point, because there's a lot of points where the violence in this movie kind of gets dulled, and it starts to make the story feel more and more hollow. Like, for example, there's all this talk about how, the robots are being wrongly persecuted, they're living things. Joshua, he's going, you just turn them off, they're just machines. But over the course of the movie, it's like, no, they are alive, they are people. But that kind of gets undercut when there's a scene where the robot police try to arrest them, and a dog fetches a grenade and brings it back.
Was that yeah, sorry, finish your point. No.
And which is kind of not only played for laughs, but also they're okay afterwards. They have their heads blown off. They're crawling around trying to find their heads. One of them is just legs, but you just walk around where's the rest of my body? And it's so they are machines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very Star Wars prequels moment with those droids or whatever. Yeah, I think there is hollow is a good way to describe a lot of this, and it kind of I think the two things that I thought the most are hollow, kind of my whole tirade, the hollowness to it, I think, and then also it's kind of miserable at points. It's just showing you these images that are just well, this sucks, and you're just okay, what am I supposed to do about that? And the same thing happens in Rogue One, and the same thing happens in Godzilla, and it's just there's this weird disconnect between imagery and intent.
I think so. There's nothing to be there's no identity to the robots outside of being targets for the evil empire, basically. Mm-hmm. That's their only role. They don't really get to exist as... We don't really get to see what their, what unique things they kind of bring to civilization. It's just, we are the victims that must be saved.
Yeah, this very placid, again, spiritually enlightened thing that's getting wiped out by this bully empire. And again, you have that one shot of the monks being executed by the things and all that kind of stuff. So it's just very very surface level, and it just doesn't really desire to go any farther than that or consider the internality of this.
Yeah. And speaking of things that it doesn't really get into, mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of people who are upset about this movie because they think that it has a pro AI message. And just really quickly, this movie doesn't make any kind of statement about AI, at least as it exists in the current discourse. This movie was in production long before it became a hot topic issue this year. So it's it has nothing to do. Gareth Edwards is not saying, yes, ChatGPT should replace everybody. He wrote the script long before ChatGPT was ever created.
No, this is robots versus humans, and it just kind of fell victim to the zeitgeist.
Yeah. That said, kind of what I mentioned before, I do wish it did more to challenge Joshua's beliefs in robots not being living things, because the movie just kind of makes this assumption at a certain point, and it's you believe this too, right? These robots are a proper species of their own, but there's a line between a sapient AI and a Roomba.
Yeah. No, I don't know. There was a point for me where it kind of I just stopped thinking about it as even robots, and it just kind of became this kind of troubling allegory about wars we've had in the past, and whether or not they were robots didn't really seem to factor in outside of the trappings of the Alfie's abilities or whatever. But that's kind of just, I think, plot dressing.
You just hit a really good point there. It doesn't matter that they're robots. If you had replaced it and be it's genetically engineered elves, most of the movie would be entirely the same.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like I'm kind of disappointed because, you know, there's certain movies and be like, oh, you know, you don't want to think about it, but the movie is telling us, yes, think deeply about this.
No, yeah, it entirely comes down to if this had been like either 5 degrees or 10 degrees like a little more intelligent or less intelligent, I would have appreciated it in one way or the other, but this kind of just finds that sweet spot right in between where it wants to kind of intellectualize, but it doesn't really put in the like effort.
And because here's the thing, like, I'll tell you one movie that actually did this in kind of an interesting way. Have you ever seen Short Circuit?
Oh, I love that one. It's been a while, but
yeah, it's been.
It's so cute and sad.
My God, I watched this a lot when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I had a DVD of it, and this movie, it's like it's kind of like an 80s comedy kind of a movie, but it addresses the idea of what does it mean for this robot that's been struck by lightning that says it's alive. Well, how do you prove that? And kind of like the answer that the movie provides is that the engineer that built the robot said, if it laughs at a joke, then it will be alive, because a computer cannot find things funny. It is a purely logical machine. Humans are unique in having the capability to say, oh, that doesn't make sense. I'm not going to spell out an error code. I'm going to laugh.
Yeah, I think that's a really elegant summation.
Yeah. And like, you know, I'm not saying that that's like the ultimate test in real life, but there should at least be some kind of line saying, oh, they have passed this test, and therefore, you know, they're more intelligent than Bonzi Buddy.
No, it's an interesting way to kind of like synthesize that this very complex and big and existential idea into something very simple and poetic.
You know, for most of the movie, yeah, and again, like, I still really got into. I was really into the first part of this movie when, you know, I was still expecting that these things were going to have big payoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, like, a lot of the way that these things kind of get paid off isn't super impactful. Like, I thought that the nuke on LA was going to be a misunderstanding. I was like, okay, something weird happened with this, and we're going to find out about it. And then it just gets told to us in the line of dialogue, yeah, it was actually human error. It was human error that caused an entire metro area to be nuked.
Yeah, like, thanks, Ken Watanabe. Yeah, that kind of was another thing that was feeding into my whole, like, sneaking things of this, like, sort of, like, these enlightened robots versus these barbaric humans and stuff. And it's just kind of, like, just a weird vibe I was getting in general. Like, again, not ill-intentioned, but just odd.
It's like,
and again, missing an opportunity to kind of explore the, like, actual robot world or whatever.
Yeah, it's like there's no, you know, there's like a little bit to show, like, oh, some of the humans are good and kind, but, you know, you want to see the other ones, like, where the robots side of maybe, you know, are like, hey, you know, we are sick of, you know, being treated like stuff, like, you know, we're gonna do some bad shit too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
yeah, I mean, you do get the
like
human protests against Nomad. It's very, again, Vietnam War protest, Iraq War protest. So it's not a monolith, but it is sort of very simple and not necessarily in, like, a good way.
It doesn't have, for it trying to make the social commentary, you have to get into the gray areas. You have to say, here's what's going on. Here's, you know, the real world is not a very neat place. You know, it's there's a lot of bad shit that goes on, and I feel like you have to address that in a movie if you're going to try to comment on the world. Otherwise, it's not going to be super applicable.
Totally.
And also just like on a storytelling point, like again, nuking Los Angeles is not an oopsie daisy, I made a mistake moment. It's like, what happened there? What happened? Why did we not know what happened? I feel like that's a very important thing.
The movie just wants you to gloss over it because you were told that it was an accident. Oopsies.
And there's another thing. So, I just realized we've just been going through spoilers. Like, whatever.
Put a spoiler tag up front or something.
Yeah, I'll just do like spoil. Yeah. I'll put it in the thumbnail, I guess. And so at first, when I first watched the movie, I really liked the twist. So Nirmata was originally presented as like the father of Joshua's wife who was attacked, and you know, he lost her, but it turns out that she was actually Nirmata, and I was like, oh, that's like a cool little thing there, where she was like, oh, like pretending it was someone else. That's kind of clever, except it was kind of both. So it's like Nirmata was her father, but then like she inherited the mantle of Nirmata.
Yes.
And this is the thing. It's a very so what's important about Nirmata then? Because the way it was presented, I was thinking like, oh, it's like somebody who had like a savant ability who was uniquely able to create AI, kind of like it's like how like the guy who created Bitcoin, nobody actually knows who he is. Like, he hasn't been seen or heard from online since 2008. And so, and like in the meantime, like the, you know, cryptocurrency's been doing all this wild, crazy stuff, and he's just been totally missing for it. And so I was like, oh, this is kind of like an interesting little mystery here. But then, so it's like, okay, so it's just like a title. And then I thought about it more, and these companies have been making AI for years before the events of the movie. So if Nirmata was like involved in creating that, I don't know.
I don't, honestly, that was the aspect of the film that I cared the least about. I think Nirmata had three functions. One, to be this kind of, one, to create Alfie. And they have they explain away that like she was so, Maya and Dad were so good at their job that they were able to make this like, I don't know, Dead Ringer's ex vivo fetus baby that could grow up. So you get Alfie to do the thing, right? You have this kind of prophet figure, so it functions more of a spiritual thing. And then they're like, fuck, we have to like tie this all together. So she's Nirmata, which was fine. And it's more to like create this like moment of emotion, to engineer this like sad climax for Joshua and Maya, you know, by making him have to kill her because she's in a coma and the monks are unable to do it because that's their savior essentially. And poor Gemma Chan, because she gets relegated to the like Marion Cotillard in Inception role, which is like so popular in this kind of thing where she just is there for like flashbacks of the past and then just to be like in a coma. So like I think it was just that, like, how do we like create this character beat, and then here's this sort of messiah figure.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And again, it's something that you know, if I didn't notice it while I was watching the movie, then I guess it worked pretty fine. But again, it's one of those things where when the movie invites you to think about it afterwards, you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute there. So, and it's like, and also like to kind of, I guess is like another kind of like nitpicky thing, because like, and this one I did actually kind of notice in the movie, because so Josh's wife has been in that coma for 5 years, but when Josh is told like, oh, go on this mission, they show like a hologram, and it's like his wife who looks like a human person. And so like, did they...
I read that as just they were baiting him. They faked a video or something and knew that would be the only thing that would get him back in the field.
Yeah, like a deep fake?
Yeah, like they deep faked it.
Okay. I guess that makes sense.
Because all we have is a video, and then she says the scans say that she's human, but we just have her word for it.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. All right. You get off this. You get off on this count. The creator. You get off on this count.
Entirely wrong, but do we get it undoing that?
There we go. Do a little. For I don't know. Did you have anything to say about the score?
Oh, you're trying to get me. Okay, fine, I'll fucking take the bait. Yeah, it's Hans Zimmer, and okay, let me put it this way. I would rather listen to this than have, like, a pipe organ blasting my sinuses clean. Like, the mix was definitely better. And I didn't hate it. He's still only got 3 modes, which is, like, placid, like, static strings when he wants to be sad. And then he was doing, like, you know, like, French horn, like, chorale shit to be, like, it was kind of stirring a couple of times, but it felt like eating McDonald's, where it's, like, very cheap and easy. And then rather than ethnic wailing, we get the kind of, like, Southeast Asian and Japanese instrumentation kind of sprinkled in, but it was fine. I will say I was pretty jarred by, like, he would just include, like, Gareth Edwards would include needle drops, like, when they're on the plane flying in to, like, take out the secret base. All of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, this sounds different. The harmonies are, like, a little bit different and more interesting. And I'm like, wait, this sounds like Tom York. And there's, like, a fucking, like, Radiohead, like, song that comes out of nowhere, and there's no explanation for it. And I guess he was maybe trying to do the kind of, like, you know, like, you know how there's, like, Flight of the Valkyries and, it's Apocalypse Now, I think, or, like, they'll have, like, rock music playing alongside the Vietnam War, and maybe he's trying to do an update of that, but it just feels weird. And then there were a couple of, like, pop song drops later on, but it was fine.
That one that you're talking about, like, is that the one that had, like, the vocals in there that felt like kind of like they were, like, broken up a little bit or something?
Yeah, Radiohead. Yeah.
I noticed that. I was like, that's odd. That doesn't seem to fit. Like, is that supposed to be a new motif for us? Oh, that's not going to show up again. Okay.
It's like, oh, it's just a song that shows up one time.
I mean, if they really wanted to make this a 10 out of 10, they should have just gone Take On Me again.
God, we can't all be the Super Mario Brothers movie. I don't know. I guess I would just wish people would start, like, employing other composers than, like, Hans Zimmer. It's just, like, this one was fine, but he's only got a couple of tricks, and it's all just, like, everything starts to sound the same. It's like every single sci-fi actioner is gonna have his score, and it's, like, gonna make everything seem the same, and that's kind of boring.
Like, that's a name that I feel like people will, like, go to see. They'll be like, oh, well, that's Hans Zimmer. I loved The Lion King. I loved, you know, stuff that he's done. And as a result, like, he gets put on so many different projects.
He's very in demand.
Yeah.
He was giving me more like Pirates of the Caribbean 3 than Inception this time, so at least it was something different.
Anyways, I think let's move into the final act of this movie. And things get a little wonky in this last act. Apparently the first cut of this movie was over 4 hours long.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And like,
anytime
and
anyone says they've got a 4-hour cut, I just reach for the button under the desk that's like the security panic button. Not today.
And, you know, like, obviously, you know, some of that is going to be extraneous. Some of that has to be trimmed out to make the movie function. But at the same time, I feel like some important connecting tissue did get lost on that cutting room floor. Like, and you can see it the most as the movie starts to wrap up.
Yeah,
like,
it does sort of start to get like hurry up mode, like, but not in an exciting way, more of a like, oh fuck, we have to get this done with.
Yeah, like it's this point where, so the military has grabbed Alfie, the child, and Joshua, and like they're being like taken apart. It's like, okay, so that's our big second act point done. But then it kind of goes for it again, where like it's like, oh, you have to disable her, you have to do it. And then it's like, oh, it was a trick that they saw on the cameras, and then they get out of the convoy, and then they get away, and it's like, I swear this happens in like 120 seconds.
Yeah, it's all very fast, and it's a trick that's so obvious that Ray Fiennes, like in the scene, realizes what Joshua's doing, and is like only inhibited by the like audio or whatever. Like,
yeah, it's like, oh, you know, her. It's so, because there's a line that's like, oh, she's like interfering with the cameras, and then a couple lines later, here's the restored footage, except we're now like miles away from where
they
we
got
were.
the Criterion Collection on it. We're like, we can get this shit restored pronto.
They have their little like they have approved AI robots that are like stuck in place that just restore all of the movies.
Here we go.
And this. In this hellish world, Suicide Squad is the most revered movie, and the
8K.
robots had to upscale it. It's the most horrendous thing that they had to go through. I don't know where I'm going with this.
It does feel very choppy, and honestly, even beforehand, like it's divided into those like chapters and whatnot, and like I think it was like the beginning of the second one or something, there's like a flashback sequence that it opens on, and that it like within a minute it goes back to kind of the present day timeline. There's just something about that was very jarring to me, and I can't quite describe why, but it just felt off. Like it should have been a little bit longer of flashback before we kind of go back or something like that. And there are like, even before we kind of get into hurry up mode at the end, just these little beats. I'm like, this just doesn't feel like it was like marinated long enough or something. So yeah, it just, there's something, there should be a happy medium. I think it being the length it was is fine, but I think that they should have kind of drawn out different points if they're going to cut it down, or maybe do 2.5 hours. I would have sat there for 15 minutes longer.
I feel like the part you're talking about was the one where like he was talking to his wife about like his prosthetic limb, and then it cuts to like him being sad in the modern day.
Yes.
That was weird to me. That stuck out to me too. And that stuck out to me because I didn't realize it was a flashback until after it ended. Yeah, it's like there was no... Because at first I was like, oh, like at least he's talking to someone and like he's trying to do his best, but then it's like, oh wait, no, that was in the past. Yeah. It's like it's the visual language doesn't always make it super clear what's going on, and that becomes a big issue near the end. So they get onto again on my notes I put it NORAD. They get onto
Santa.
Does Santa bring presents to the robots? Does he recognize them?
He brings missiles. That's his sleigh that they're trying to take down.
Violent Night 2.
Don't give him ideas.
So they get on Nomad, and things go remarkably smoothly for them when they're on.
Ever immediately evacuates. She can do whatever the hell she wants. He can crawl along in outer space. It was just very nice. How kind of them to make things so simple.
How nice for the U.S. military to just have no defenses on the most prized vehicle in their fleet. But there is one defense. It's a giant mechanical tentacle monster.
Yeah, it looked like something out of I don't know, a J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie or something. It was very weird.
It's so here's the thing, it really sticks out to me as the one thing in the movie that looks like CGI. Everything else is so convincing. Everything else looks so good, and then I see this, I'm like, oh, that looks like it belongs in phase 4.
Yeah, it just didn't fit into the rest of the world, because all the ground vehicles and stuff are very coded of okay, this is a tank, and it's obviously bigger and more futuristic, but it's a tank. The Nomad looks pretty cool, I think. I like the design of the light shafts coming down and stuff. And, yeah. But again, it's kind of, it feels okay, it kind of more sci-fi than the other vehicles they use, but it still feels rooted in some form of reality. But this tentacle beast is eldritch and just not what planning committee decided to build that. And why is it fucking Sam Raimi?
Do you think Gareth Edwards is trying to tell us something? Because there is a tentacle thing in Rogue One, remember? That
maybe
thing that
oh god.
Mr. Edwards.
He's the guy from the creepy dude in The Handmaiden who's got tentacle hentai in his secret torture room and God.
No, jeez.
Imagine.
Yeah.
And it's now.
And on the one hand, it's kind of a small thing, but for whatever reason, it took me out so much from the rest of everything that was happening. And kind of for a moment, I'm oh, this movie isn't really good anymore.
Yeah, it just felt everything had been so copacetic up to that and felt of a part, even in the kind of, heterogeneity or whatever of it. But this is just so jarringly different and at a really important part of the movie that you're I am shutting it down. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, so the escape pod malfunctions, so Joshua stays on Nomad to die while the child goes back to Earth, and then he sees the simulant of his wife, which the child found there. Again, I was kind of is there a theme I'm missing?
I feel they were just going for that kind of final reunion. It's very I don't know, Gladiator kind of they're both gonna die, but he's been looking for her for the last 5 years, and or, you know what I mean, or grieving her, and finally they have this reunion when they couldn't have that earlier. So it's just kind of trying to put a button on a pair of characters that you probably don't really care about being together, even though it tells you that over and over again. I will say it was that whole the USB drive that you could like upload somebody's conscious onto and then like transfer to another body was like the ethical implications of that are deeply troubling. The fact that it just kind of uses it as like this weird gimmick is a little creepy. But yeah, I think it was trying to just go for this like final, like they're together again at the end of it all.
Yeah, that was like, to be fair, like I think the movie does kind of present it like because the like the military uses it on a guy to like get like to try to interrogate him to find information, and like he's like horrified like when he comes to. So it's like, so I think the movie does kind of realize like, yeah, this is kind of fucked up.
But then it uses it for the emotional ending, and she's in her own body, so I guess that kind of like fixes it, but it's not her body, it's a simulated copied version of her. So I don't know, I think it's real mixed messages here.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like a lot of this movie is kind of half-baked.
Well, they are very well done when that thing blows up, so.
Yes. I will. God. I will say that like kind of like at the very end, like after like Nomad like crashes, everyone's like, yay, you know, like hooray for like Cha and everything. I felt a little something. I was kind of like, yay, you know, like war's over now.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I got swept up into like a little bit. So I guess, you know, as much as we have been criticizing it for like 40 minutes, I think like at the end of the day, like I still responded at least partially to it, but I feel like not as strongly as the movie would have wanted me to.
No,
as much as I would have wanted to.
Yeah, I was like that moment when he's like saying goodbye to her, or when Joshua is saying goodbye to Alfie. There's a couple of beats where I'm like, I'm aware that my heartstrings are being tugged at, but I'm a cynical asshole, so I refuse to respond. Because I just didn't like the movie at that point. Wasn't gonna let it do to me. I do think that it was good that it just kind of ended when it did, like, because that was what really mattered. I was like, is there gonna be another scene of like her meeting a family or something? And I'm like, that's not really important. Like, that's not what really matters here. And so it was effective in just how it ended, I think.
I think they cut it off at a good point. I mean, ideally they would have cut it off before the tentacle monster got on there, sure. But yeah, again, like there's so many parts of it where it's like I want to like this more than I do, and it's because like on the one hand, like it's a very flawed movie, but at the same time I do want to see more of it. Like if they actually did put out I really feel like this could benefit from like some kind of director's cut, something that has more context for things, something that might be able to fill in like gaps, especially in that third act, space it out a little bit better.
I feel like it could maybe flesh the plot out, and maybe we might care about the central dynamic between Joshua, Alfie, and Maya more if we get some more background or context there. But I just don't feel like adding more things, while it might flesh out the world some and explain that. I just don't think it's gonna. If it's more of the same, it's still gonna be a little bit too simplistic, and I don't know if adding additional scenes would resolve the fact that it isn't approaching it's saying that it's approaching something with more intelligence than it truly is. So I'm on the fence about that.
It's a good point. Because like it won't really. Well, you never know. Maybe the half hour they cut out of it is actually going to be like the PhD thesis. Like Ken Watanabe is going to stand there and just deliver his thesis defense to you about why robots actually deserve equal rights.
Don't threaten me with a bad time.
So, Reynard, would you recommend The Creator?
Yeah, I think I would. Maybe And I would say watch it like in the theater. It definitely benefits from the large format, the really like rich sound and whatnot. You know, I don't think you should go in expecting like high concept science fiction, but if you go in and be like, this is going to eventually become just pretty rote action sci-fi, then I think you'll be primed for it to at least to know what is coming, Pat.
I think I'm in the same way, because I went into it, I was looking for kind of like a high concept science fiction, and it didn't really get there for me. I was a little disappointed by that, but I do think that it has enough there that I'm glad I saw it. I don't regret seeing it. And I think that if there was an extended cut released, I would very likely like eagerly jump on that to watch it. And then I can tell you if you should give it a shot.
Yeah, I might watch an extended cut. I would not watch a sequel. This story is wrapped up.
Yeah, it's... Well, what if Joshua gets like a simulant, and then there could be... They make another nomad, and then...
But this nomad can blow up 7 planets at once.
Exactly. And then there'll be... And then... It's 11 at night. I can't be funny. Anyway... any departing thoughts for our lovely viewers back home?
I think we've kind of chewed over a lot. The one thing I will say to kind of cap it off is like skimming the discourse on the internet, which is something that's never a good idea. I think it is mildly encouraging because I think some people seem to be of mind that's like they're glad to watch original stories, but they also seem to be honest about the shortcomings of the film. And I think that it's good that the line shouldn't be it's eat your slop because it's original. At least it's original. Like, I think maybe if people start to understand that people are interested in novel stories and it's not all about IP, that will drive the creative process toward creating original stories, but ones that are also engaging, like intellectually or emotionally, you know, so that maybe is a hopeful sign.
I hope so, because again, like the fact that this movie was made was $80 million, like,
yeah,
we're seeing like this resurgence of like these sensibly sized productions now.
Yeah.
Like to go off on just like a little tangent here, like let me just read off like some numbers for you, okay? Barbie cost $100 million to make. Oppenheimer cost $100 million to make. Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, $300 million to make that. So for the cost of one Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, you could have made Barbie, and you could have made Oppenheimer, and you could have made The Creator, and had enough left over for 1 month's rent in Los Angeles.
Yeah, there's definitely bloat.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that The Creator will end up being successful, and maybe that'll spur the studios to say, hey, let's take on normal sized projects and maybe we can do something with that. We can get some new interesting ideas back on the scene.
Here's to interesting stories.
Indeed. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Reynard. It's always a pleasure.
Always.
And I thank you, all of you at home, for watching. I'm Daniel Goldhorn. You can find me on YouTube at Daniel Goldhorn.
And I'm Reynard, /cinema over on Tumblr.
And we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Bye.